Thank you, Mr. President. I am honored to open the debate today on the effort by this body and by the United States Congress to give loved ones of the victims of terrorism on 9/11 their day in court. Simple justice. 15 years ago, we stood in horror as our country suffered the worst terrorist attack on the United States in the history of our nation. Nearly 3,000 innocent lives were lost, including heroic first responders, firemen, police, and beloved and honorable men and women, 148 of them from my home state of Connecticut. Over these years, I have watched and listened to them in their strength and courage as they have sought tirelessly to make this system of justice work in the memory of their loved ones. The terrorists who struck on 9/11 tried and failed to destroy that system of justice and the ideals of this nation. Our hearts were broken, but our country and our ideals were not. Over the past 15 years, I've been honored to work with those families, and today gives us the opportunity to move forward with legislation despite the President's veto. I deeply respect the President and the reasons that he has given for vetoing the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. But I urge my colleagues to move swiftly and soundly to reverse this veto so that these families can have their day in court. That is what the legal system of this country is designed to do. It is a system that I have spent my career before the Senate working to ensure accountability for wrongdoers and restoration of victims' rights, promises to citizens that are made by our Constitution, that there will be a neutral and fair forum to determine their claims. These families will never get back their loved ones, but they deserve justice and a day in court, and that is why we will today, I hope, override the President's veto. 15 years after that tragedy, we are still learning the facts, but there is mounting evidence that the Saudi government, or at least organizations and operatives within the Saudi government, aided and abetted one of the most massive crimes in the United States. In our system, the truth behind those facts deserves to be presented in court. A court of law where fairness and justice will be assured. This measure does not prejudge a verdict or issue a judgment. It gives both sides a fair day in court. And if the Saudi government had no involvement in 9/11, it has nothing to fear. But if it was culpable, it should be held accountable. That is the basic principle of this measure. When all is said and done, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act simply closes a loophole that was created by the courts, contrary to the intent of this body. That loophole, in effect, permits foreign governments to aid and abet crimes against the citizens of this country as long as its aiding and abetting occurred outside our borders. Think of it as a missile launched from another country by terrorists there with the support and assistance of that foreign government. that foreign government can evade any and all responsibility simply because the missile was launched outside our borders. Similarly, the missile of terrorism can be launched outside our borders, and the foreign government, including Saudi Arabia, is able to evade all responsibility under the decision made by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York that created that loophole. And so that foreign government can give terrorists bags of money, tons of explosives, to carry out murder within our borders as long as it does so outside our borders. And that is wrong. The principle here is broader and bigger than Saudi Arabia or even the 9/11 victims. It is about simple justice. Our law should recognize the reality that global crimes can be sponsored and supported outside our borders and inflict grave harm, including murder, on the citizens of our country within our borders. This loophole will be closed by this measure for the benefit not only of the 9/11 victims, but also potential victims in the future. It will send a message and deter violent crime in this country, aided and abetted by foreign governments in the future. It will deter that kind of violence through an ideal and a tradition that is uniquely American, a system of justice that imposes accountability and makes sure that everybody has a fair day in court. I know that questions have been raised about potential retaliation or reprisals against members of our military or citizens in other countries. This nation should stand firm and strong against terrorist violence. And we have nothing to fear as long as we do not engage in supporting or sponsoring the kind of violence that occurred on 9/11 here. And we must trust that our government would never be responsible for that kind of aiding and abetting of deliberate killing of innocent civilians, purposeful massacre of people who are innocent. I am honored to begin this debate, and I hope it will be closed in a way that vindicates the rights as well as the interests of our country. I am proud to join colleagues on both sides of the aisle. This measure has been bipartisan from the start, and I particularly want to thank my colleagues, Senator Schumer and Senator Cornyn, for their leadership. I believe that a bill that was unanimously passed by both houses of Congress, strongly supported by both sides of the aisle, deserves to become law. And I trust and believe it will today. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.